Good morning and assalamu alaikum for all of you joining us here today. My name is Sheahnee Iman and I'm your moderator for this forum today. It gives me a great honor to welcome all of you to the MILO Grit Advantage Forum via webinar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for over 70 years, MILO has been bringing the goodness of energy to Malaysians and championing the successes in sport and beyond. So it's unsurprising to learn that most Asian societies, including Malaysia, place great importance on academic achievements and the development of skill sets for students and young professionals alike. However, the character traits responsible for sustained success are often ignored or undervalued. It's just academics, academics, academics. Malaysian parents do understand the importance of raising well-rounded individuals with diverse experience, and they do acknowledge the importance of sports. But when push comes to shove, they prioritize academics, lessons, and post-school tutoring above anything else. And I think even now, during the CMCO, I think we can even see that that's happening right in front of us, more so than ever. The result is that most kids leading sheltered lives and being ill-equipped for the real world. Most crucially, they are unable to develop grit, which is the passion and perseverance for long-term success. That's the key quality that sets the truly successful apart from the rest. So to get us thinking about what grit really is, here's a quick video. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Grit, one word, but it's all about the passion and perseverance for long-term and meaningful goals. And as you saw in the video just now, it's actually an all-encompassing character trait that encapsulates 8 qualities that are critical to a child's early development to ensure that we can future-proof our child. Courage, determination, resilience, tenacity, passion, persistence, endurance, and excellence. And all of these things are things that we want for our kids, but how do we help them achieve that? In line with its belief that sport is a great teacher of important life lessons and values, MILO recently commissioned a research study called the Grit Advantage. This research was conducted amongst educators and employers nationwide, and it was aimed at understanding what educators from different institutions perceive to be the behaviors of current students, the importance of grit, and the traits required to be successful, and to also understand the views of employers, the people who are going to hire our children from various industries on young professionals today, the importance of grit and key traits when looking at potential hires. The report was launched last week and has sparked some conversation already among parents on social media. Some of you are watching today. Now, let's take a look at some of the key findings of the Grit Advantage report. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a resounding 80% of educators and employers pointed to grit as the defining factor that will take our children on the path to significant, lasting success in the 21st century. Now, in general, educators caution that academics alone is not enough. Balancing academics with extracurricular activities is critical for success, according to 3 out of 4 educators. Next up, some 71% say it's important for children to learn from failure in order to be successful, meaning failure and successful need each other. 82% believe that determination to pursue one's goal and never give up is the most important early predictor of success. Meanwhile, 93% believe that grit is central to character building and fulfilling one's passion. So that was the findings from educators. Now let's look at the key findings from the employers. Now, in general, employers observed that there is a lack of grit among today's young professionals. Taking the easy way out is an attitude that is pervasive amongst today's young professionals. In fact, 79% of employers noted that fragmented career paths and frequent job switches on their resumes was a key indicator of that. As many as 72% said that the children of today need to be taught patience with a sense of purpose. Very important. 70% of employers agreed that young professionals must be open to making mistakes and learning from them if they were to achieve enduring success on their career path. Not perfection, but making mistakes. And finally, when it comes to hiring talents, 7 out of 10 employers, the majority, chose well-rounded individuals over those with just good grades. So they're looking into so much more on the resume rather than just the amount of A's that they had in SPM and university. So these are really quite interesting results. To summarize, the majority of educators and employers in Malaysia agree that grit is the most important trait that drives a child's future success. However, our young generation today suffers from a widespread deficit of grit. This is evidenced by their attitude of giving up easily when faced with setbacks or failures, or switching from one interest to another without building real skills or passion. It's also seen in the fragmented career paths or frequent job switches among young professionals. And to this end, we're taking the findings from the MILO Grit Advantage report and bringing them into this forum today to hear the thoughts and opinions from our panel of experts who will be joining us from both education and the corporate sector, as well as the startup segment. So it's my honor to introduce to you our panelists for today. I'll give a round of introduction and each of our panelists will share with us what grit means to them. First up, I'd like to introduce Timothy Johnson. He's a Senior Vice President of Marketing, Product and Partnerships from INTI Education Group. He'll be representing educators today. Hi, Timothy.
Hi, Sheahnee. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, Tim is a marketer with over 25 years of experience spanning fast-moving consumer goods, financial services, and now education across top brands such as Nestle, Citigroup, and Standard Chartered before joining INTI International University and Colleges for the last 7 years. We're pleased to have you with us. Please tell us, Tim, what does grit mean to you?
I think it's very interesting, Sheahnee. And if you look at the poll that you just did, and you spoke as someone who did sports and has a child who picked up ukulele. To me, grit is kind of the glue that binds everything together. And passion gets you probably to the starting line. Grit takes you over to the cross, takes you across. And I think that's a very important point to note. And personally, for me, being in the education field, it's really about reinventing education. And grit is a big part of that journey that we undertake.
I can't wait to hear more of what you have to say later, Tim. I'm sure we're going to have a great time during our forum today. We'll come back to you in a bit. Sure. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to introduce Shahzad Umar, the Executive Director of Human Resources for Nestle Malaysia Berhad. Now, Shahzad first joined Nestle in 2001 and has since grown his career in human resources with the brand. He was appointed Executive Director of Group Human Resources for Nestle Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei in 2016. Now, here's a fun fact. Shahzad is a Pakistani national and a graduate of the University of Engineering and Technology in Lahore, Pakistan, with a degree in mechanical engineering, and holds a master's in business administration from Nottingham University Malaysian campus. So how he ended up in human resources, I think will be an interesting story for us to catch later. Shahzad, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sheahnee. Assalamu alaikum, and good morning to all of you.
Walaikum salam. Shahzad, please share with us, what does grit mean to you?
Sheahnee, after close to 20 years of working in corporate sector, having worked in 3 different geographies, in my experience, what I've seen that a key quality that differentiates truly successful people from the rest is their consistency of effort over the long run. So this consistency of effort, this endurance is what grit means to me.
And I'm sure that being in human resources, you would have seen what it takes for someone to grow in their career, yes?
Exactly. Not just grow and join a company, grow towards senior positions, global roles, leadership roles, which are, truly at a global level for a big company like Nestle. Yes, this is what really differentiates.
Fantastic. I look forward to hearing more from you, Shahzad, and your input on HR in the corporate sector later on in the forum. Okay, sure. Next up joining us is Ben Ho, the founder and CEO of Talentbank. Ben is the founder and CEO there, an award-winning global employer branding, recruitment, market research, and education specialist. Ben and his team are doing important work at Talentbank. Their mission is to build a comprehensive employability ecosystem in order to reduce the unemployment rate in Malaysia. So I'm sure he's going to have lots of important things to share with us today. Hi, Ben. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Sheahnee, everyone.
Ben, being in the employment field, share with us, please, what grit means to you as a professional.
To me, grit is a capability to persevere against any challenges that life throws at us. Most of the time, solutions on how to overcome a problem will not be always served on a silver platter. But by having a right mental fortitude and keep facing a problem head on, you'll always 100% overcome it.
I'm sure you, of all people, would know that, being in the line that you're in. Thank you, Ben. I look forward to hearing your input later. And finally, on our panel for this morning, Nina Othman, the founder of Grow the Goose and Borneo Cocoa. I've been following her journey for quite some time. Nina was an entrepreneur for 14 years, building and testing over 13 different ventures before being introduced to the concept of social entrepreneurship. She's joining us from Kota Kinabalu, Sabah this morning, where she is based. There, she runs 2 social enterprises, Grow the Goose, which conducts financial empowerment programs for kids, and Borneo Cocoa to empower small cocoa growers in Borneo with ethical and sustainable income-generating skills. She's also currently the Vice President of the Chamber of Social Entrepreneur Development in Malaysia. Welcome, Nina. Good morning.
Good morning from Sabah.
You've had Milo this morning, haven't you? So full of energy.
Yes. Chicha cream crackers, chicha Milo panas, the best.
Please share with us, Nina. I think, since you work with children and cocoa growers in Borneo, please share with me what you think grit means.
So for me, my definition of grit is realizing that there are certain certain struggles and challenges that you need to go through, but you still go for it anyways. It's like you realize that in order to get there, you need to just stay the course and trust the process. So that's my definition, at least. Yeah.
And having dabbled in entrepreneurship for 14 years, I think you more than anybody would know how that feels. The pain of entrepreneurship. Yes.
The rush.
Yes, the rush. Now, thank you, Nina, and to all of our panelists so far. Apart from the panelists that you see on your screen right now, we'll also have a special guest who'll be joining us mid-forum a short while later, Yang Berbahagia, Datuk Dr. Habibah Abdul Rahim. She is the Director General of Education, the Ministry of Education, and she'll be joining us in about half an hour. So we'll just kick off the forum first with our panelists. Let's start with Tim. As this is a webinar, we'll be structuring our discussion around the expertise of each of our panelists. So let's start with the education sector. Tim, my first question for you is, From your experience working in the education line, do you agree with the findings of the grit report that says educators and employers saying our kids today lack grit?
So I think this is a common thing that I hear from educators as well as employers. The important thing to realize is that they're all our age, and every generation will tend to kind of say the generation that we're kind of coaching or we're kind of nurturing is doing things less. And I think an interesting fact, which a lot of people don't realize, is that in the workforce, for the first time ever, we have 4 generations. So a lot of companies will have baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z all working together at the same time. And that's like a cocktail or a recipe for interesting times. And I think that's interesting because you find intergenerational discussions and different understandings of what grit is being carried out. And so the constant kind of talk is do you work hard or do you work smart in solving it? But in all those, either generation, I think grit is a key prevalent streak that is very important across all generations. It's the definition of grit that probably changes across each generation. And so that lack of grit, I think, needs to be investigated further so that there is a deeper understanding of what really grit means. It'll be interesting to see if you take this further and you actually ask kids to define what grit means. Is grit getting an extra level on their video game, right? But persevering in that end to achieve that grit, so as opposed to as an adult telling the kid, look, you have to do your homework, otherwise you will get punished. So I think that's my view on this topic, and looking at education, and really, if I look at tertiary education, that's really at the end of their formative years, whereby if grit is not inculcated at a young age, it gets tougher as you grow older. Like all habits, right? Habits are formed at a young age. And a lot of it has to do with parents. A lot of it has to do with educators at a young age. At a university level, this is probably the biggest time that grit is being demonstrated. Kids are studying online, despite having what I call distractions. There's only so much of the Queen's Gambit. There's only so much of Among Us that you can play. But yes, you still got to keep to your studies. And I think that's really a test for the grit, which it'll be interesting 10 years from now to actually look back at these kids who have gone through this pandemic year and realize how much of grit has been inculcated in them, that they will succeed no matter what life throws at them.
There are lots of lessons from this last year that they will carry forward with them throughout their life. I have 3 kids under the age of 10. So, of course, I'm really paying attention to what everybody's going to be saying today. But what interested me about what you said earlier about where tertiary education is, where you're going to see the results of the parenting and how the children have been raised up until then. To prep children today for future success, what can tertiary education do to inculcate or inspire grit for students, or is it too late?
No, it's not too late. And I think that's where, whether it's 3 years or 4 years that they spend in tertiary education, we try our best to prepare them for skill sets that will prepare them for the future. And I think it's very important to realize that, because a lot of jobs haven't been created yet, that you don't know what you're going to get yourself into. So things like grit, things like working in a mobile environment, things whereby skill sets are being transferable. If higher education institutions prepare their kids in that sense, then your job is actually quite well done. And I think the other very important thing is to create lifelong learners. I think the biggest challenge that any kid has is that learning doesn't stop the minute you leave university. And I think creating that lifelong learning will enable you to actually persevere despite any setbacks that you might have going up in the future. The other thing about grit is that it's not so much about overcoming the challenge, but how do you feel after you've overcome that challenge? What does that do for you?
Yeah.
And I think, experience is always the best thing. That's why grit actually comes across as a result of the multiple challenges that you face, and how you respond to it is one, but really where you are after that is probably going to be the test of your gritness, if ever there was an index for it.
Thank you, Tim. That's fantastic. So basically what you're saying is that tertiary is where it's tested, but it's real life really that will be the real test. And
Yes.
that while the context of grit may change from generation to generation, like while you're a kid, it's homework, okay? That will be a
Yes.
test of your grit. But when you're older, for a job that doesn't exist yet, well, who knows what the context is going to be then? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Tim. We'll come back to you in a short while. For now, I'd like to toss my next question to to Ben. All right. From education, moving on to employment, more specifically, the job market. Ben, according to the Grit Advantage report, 79% of employers said that they see too many industry switches on resumes of young professionals. Is this a cause for concern?
At Talentbank, we started working on employability agenda since 2011. We collaborate with employers and universities. Yes, of course, we saw a lot of high turnover among young professionals, which is a cause of concern for both employers and employees. So this actually has a negative impact on productivity and individual growth in terms of employability. So high turnover also affects productivity because the employees need more time to search for the replacement. Then employers also see immediate, frequent industry switches as a lack of commitment as long-term goal. For example, lack of grit and in general not favorable. In my opinion, young people and fresh grads are in need of a mindset makeover.
Right. Now, based on your work at Talentbank, what are the job market trends are you seeing over the past few years that young professionals, as well as parents who are preparing those young professionals, what do they need to be mindful of?
In October, we actually conducted a survey with about 200 employers, about MNC, GLC, and also some SMEs. We asked them, this is actually called Graduate Recruitment Insights. So we asked them, we learned three things which is important for recruitment metrics. So the main three things are actually career readiness, extracurricular activities, and reputation of universities. The first two is actually particular concern for parents. In terms of career readiness, on scale of 1 to 10, employers rate today's fresh grad 6. So to me, ideally, fresh grad should be about 7 to 8. This also shows to me there's a room for improvement. When we speak to employers and recruiters, we saw a lack of career readiness stem from low sense of commitment or motivation to succeed. Also, in the last 5 years, the trend has remained the same at around 6 out of 10. Yeah. As for the second point relating to extracurricular activities, it's also interesting to note similarities in findings between Grit Advantage and also our Talentbank's graduate recruitment insight survey. So
now,
one
finally,
thing very interesting, which in our survey, we also ask these questions to employers. We ask them, do you prefer candidates that has good attitude over academic results or academic result compass? So majority of them say good attitude compass.
Yeah, attitude. I mean, I was an employer myself, and I completely agree with you. Now, per the Grit Advantage report, 70% of employers also said young professionals that are open to making mistakes have leadership potential. We have so many people who are focused on perfection, is too scared to make mistakes. But with great emphasis being placed on excellence and success and perfection, how can we inculcate the grit mindset among young professionals to face failure and then bounce back without giving up too easily?
In my opinion, to inculcate grit mindset among young professionals are below. Employers should give credit to employees' effort, not just outcomes, and find a passion point. Maybe employers need to play proactive role in helping employees to do this, and this will help employees to sustain their efforts. So this picture also shows that when I built Talentbank Career Discovery Center, which is located at Sunday Joe Avenue, We are putting this in possible. The impossible is because the objective is to remind the young professionals that they must always have grit in them, so they'll always be prepared to face challenges. In my career sharing with young professionals, I always tell them, always having this mindset, possible, must do mindset, and also get it done mindset.
Thank you, Ben. That is fantastic stuff, and I'd really like to dive into that further during the Q&A later on. Now, Nina and Shahzad, we'll come back to you a little bit later because we have our special guest joining us now all the way from Putrajaya, Datuk Dr. Habibah Abdul Rahim, the Director General of Education from the Ministry of Education, will be joining us to share her insights on grit. Now, Datuk Dr. Habibah is the 17th Director General of Education at the Ministry of Education Malaysia and is only the second woman to helm the post. She started her service in education in 1986 as a teacher in several schools in Selangor and Kedah before moving on to serve under several organizations under the ministry such as Education Planning and Research Division or BPPDP, Performance and Delivery Unit, BADU, and Institute Aminuddin Baki or IAB. She earned a PhD in education from Stanford University in California, United States in 2001, and she'll be joining us any moment now. So we'll be on standby to take a question with her shortly after this. While we wait, I'll just jump into a question for Shahzad. Okay, Shahzad. Now, earlier we heard from Ben. Let's hear what our other expert in the corporate sector, Shahzad, has to say. Now, how has the employment in the corporate sector changed in the past 10 to 15 years in terms of how you hire talents? And what skills are you looking for in prospective hires?
See, Sheahnee, skills is just one part of the equation. In the HR sphere globally, there's this mantra that is used that hire for attitude and train for skills. And that has been true for many years that I've worked in HR, and I think even beyond that as well. All the good companies that you look out there would be actually looking for people whose character counts more than their credentials. They're looking for the passion, not the pedigree of the person that they're hiring. And all these big companies or all these good companies that you see out there, they would have their own leadership frameworks or some list of behaviors, qualities, or traits that they would look for in their people, in their managers, in their leaders. And if you look at that, we can also Google it as well. These traits are generally qualities like courage, determination, result focus, initiative, passion, perseverance. No, so these are things which are proven over years of experience of these companies that these are the real differentiator. And for us as a company, I mean, looking at the current context that we are in with the global pandemic, we see it that those people who are really passionate, who are really determined to get things done, are really, showing that resilience compared to those who might be struggling with the current challenges that we have. And if I were to bring it back into the Nestle context, we are a company, after more than 150 years of our existence in the world, our employer value proposition is still about joining the company and retiring from the organization. Just to share by Nestle standards, after 20 years, I'm still in my infancy. There are many people who are 30, 35, 40 years of experience with the company. Just 2 days ago, I was talking to an individual who's completing, mashallah, 40 years with the company. And you see and you hear a lot of these stories from these people, that proudness that they have in how they persevered to bring the company to where it stands today. I think that's what the real essence of our culture is as a company. Looking at these people, looking at these stories, I think so. So talent and skills are important. They can get you into an interview process, but to get you into a job and to persevere and strive for bigger roles or bigger responsibilities, you need much more things, and that's where that grit advantage, that grit factor comes in.
So what I'm getting at is that when you're actually looking at a resume, you're not even looking at the number of A's that the child has. You're also looking at how long the growth they can spend with your company. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. We are trying, like I said, we still try to aim for hiring people who can join us and can have a long-term career with the company. And we want to see that what are those behaviors that really make that personality, make that character who we are trying to hire for our organization, and then how can we nurture that individual for bigger roles and responsibility in the company.
As an employer myself, I completely agree with that. Now, I'd love to circle back to what you said about the volatile job market due to the pandemic and how we need to be more agile to adapt to the new normal, and how those people who had grit were the ones who did well during the pandemic, regardless of the circumstances. Now, according to a separate study, 85% of jobs that will be essential by 2030 don't exist yet. So with so many uncertainties, what can fresh grads or parents of young kids today do to prepare them for the job market of the future?
Yeah, I think so. So in my personal view, the world as a whole is moving from knowledge economy to a creative economy. And the job market of the future would be even more competitive, would be even more tough in times to come. And companies will not just look for IQ. We already look for not just IQ, emotional quotient, social quotient, EQ, SQ, etc. So it's that mix of those soft skills and those street skills, that well-rounded personality that Timothy was alluding to earlier, that we try to look for. So for fresh grads or for parents of children who are studying, I think what we should encourage them to do is to go out and explore their interests, make their own choices. You will falter, you will stumble, you will make errors, but that's where the actual prize is. If you follow through, if you persevere, you will build a character which companies of today and companies of future will always look for. And that is what will make you employable, come no matter what happens to the economy or to the industry or to the job market 5, 10 years, 20 years down the road. So it's that well-rounded character, well-rounded personality that will always make people employable.
And let them experience that while they're young and still able to make lots of mistakes, yeah?
Exactly. Never give up and, experiment and hit and trial. No, you will learn as you progress.
Thank you so much, Shahzad. Thank you. We'll come back to you in a short while. Now, while we wait for Datuk Dr. Habibah to join us from Putrajaya, we're just setting her up over there. Let's move on over to Nina. She's an entrepreneur turned not-for-profit social entrepreneur with not one, but 2 social enterprise startups. I don't know how you do it. Tell us a little bit more about your passion, your drive, your motivation to pursue your career goals, Nina, and that leap you took to transition from being an entrepreneur to being a social entrepreneur.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that I was an entrepreneur for 14 years. And in that 14 years, I managed to achieve the status of 13 failed ventures. And I don't know why I still do it. No, I had a production house, advertising agency lah, events company lah, baking studio, photo studio, macam-macam, And I don't know, it's just something that I like to do. It just gives you this rush. And anyway, at Grow the Goose is actually we offer financial empowerment workshops, and how it started is with my own kids. I was in confinement with my 3rd child, and then my 2 boys, aged 4 and 6, then were like they wanted roller shoes. I snapped at them and I said, go and find your own money. I don't have money. Go and find your own money. Then you go and buy your roller shoes yourself. Later, I realized I was having postnatal depression lah. That's why I bled. Anyway. So the thing is, this is where I noticed grit actually exists in all of us at a young age already. Kids don't give up. If they want something, they'll roll on the floor crying, or they give you that Puss and Boots eyes like, kesian like that, just to make sure they get what they want. Meaning grit is already present in them there. But whether or not we nurture that, I feel like that's my thoughts. So my boys were like, come back later and they said, Mommy, we want to sell ayam goreng like Mail from Upin Ipin. And I'm like, what? And I knew then at 4 and 6 that these kids, if you could just feel them there, anything could happen. And I knew they were not going to give up.
Yeah,
correct. Yep. So they were not going to give up. So I'm like, okay, I had to give in. Long story short, they ended up selling healthy sausages, and within 2 weeks, made enough money for them to buy their roller shoes. So then I was okay. Challenging your own kids worked. So I challenged other people's kids. And that worked, and that's how Grow the Goose came about. So we provide financial empowerment workshops for children, and a portion of our profits goes to running free programs for children from marginalized communities. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I've also been following personally your story of how you're encouraging your child in his own cocoa business. So on his own entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah. So we do that. So in our programs, we teach money habits, ways to save using the money jar system and things like that. And we also teach them how to earn responsibly. So we want kids to actually realize however they run the business affects the community and affects the environment, for example. So we already teach them early, like you said. So for my son, I think he saw what I wanted to do. My own personal childhood dream is to become a chocolate scientist and have my own chocolate factory. So when we moved to Sabah 2 years ago, I actually stumbled with this community, a group of cocoa farmers who had lots and lots of acres and hectares of abandoned cocoa trees. And I'm like, why? I did a lot of digging and things like that. There were more technical stuff. In any case, so I set up Borneo Cocoa to teach them to produce better quality beans and also how to produce their own snacks to get them to have better incomes. And I think my son saw that and he was like, can I sell stuff too? Cocoa-based stuff. And he actually mentioned, he was like, Nestle is 150 years. I want to build my own chocolate company too. And, I want to be like Nestle. He actually said that. And I'm like, budak ni, So, I think, so I do more of the trainings with the cocoa farmers. And then whatever products that they come up with, I actually get Arman. Arman says he wants to sell peanut butter made from chocolate and things like that. So we experiment and then we start selling. And then, with the money, he buys his own bicycle. He bought his own handphone. And it's interesting because I was just looking back and that's exactly what my mom did to me when I was 10. She was like, you want something, you go and find your own money. Yeah. And so now I realize, hey, I actually done the same thing actually. So I guess it runs in the family. Yeah.
You're passing on that lesson, I think, because I guess involving your child in entrepreneurship is actually one of the ways you're developing grit in him for later on.
Yes. Parents come to me and say, they don't want their kids to be doctors and lawyers. They want their kids to be, don't want their kids to be entrepreneurs. They want to be doctors and lawyers. And I say, we want your kids to be doctors and lawyers, but doctors with their own clinics, lawyers with their own firms. So entrepreneurship is a skill set and it will build that grit that you need.
Regardless of your profession. Yep. And you're going to need lots of grit, especially when you're an entrepreneur, to survive that. Yep. Now, the rise in startups and social enterprises means that there are lots more opportunities for young professionals today and in the future for kids to discover their passion. And we find they're turning their passion into a startup, into a journey of entrepreneurship. Based on your experience, how can grit help them to succeed in this setting? Because I think between you and me being entrepreneurs, we know that to survive entrepreneurship, grit is going to be a key ingredient in that.
Yeah. Well, I'll come from the context of social entrepreneurship because that's my subject matter. I think it's similar with tech startups and it's the same thing. It's just that with social entrepreneurship, there's an extra thing that you have to juggle. You have to balance the business arm and the impact arm. So that's extra struggle or challenge that you need to fill. And without grit, I think you wouldn't last. It's as simple as that. It's knowing that there'll be certain failures that you have to go through in order to achieve a certain impact that you want to create. And it's not going to happen just like overnight, just, okay, I got it. Cannot. Different communities will have different needs as well. And without that ability to empathize and have that grit to say like, oh yeah, this one won't work. Let's try another way. It's just that mindset, that ability to be agile and like, okay, never mind, let's go, let's try. So a lot of those that we see still in this scene and going strong are those who have that grit, that perseverance, that persistence, fueled by passion, driven by purpose, that whole thing all glued together like what Timothy was saying.
Yeah. Thank you, Nina. We'll come back and discuss that later on in our Q&A session. But for now, we're going to be joined by Datuk Dr. Habibah Abdul Rahim, who is the Director General of Education, Ministry of Education. She's actually on the line right now. Assalamualaikum, Datuk. Welcome to the MILO Grit Advantage Forum. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us.
Waalaikumsalam.
Now, we understand how packed your schedule is, and thus we're so humbled actually that you're kind enough to spare some time today to be part of this important dialogue. I'm just going to fill you in on what we've been discussing for the past half hour or so. We've heard from the other four panelists on their thoughts on the key findings from the MILO Grit Advantage report. So for your benefit, here's a brief recap. First of all, to sustain meaningful success in the 21st century, academics alone is not enough. There needs to be a balance between academic and co-curricular achievements. And this was agreed by both our experts in education and also employment sectors. They acknowledge that this quality will help create a balanced individual who's geared for success, and that is sought after by employers who are looking to hire prospective talents, and that grit is the one value that helps to maintain this balance, and all our panelists agree to that. Also, that grit is a reinforcement of the fighting spirit and the values of perseverance, resilience, persistence, hard work, and discipline that comes from one's passion and interest, and that is the thing that drives meaningful, long-lasting success. And that it's the opposite of efforts that result in immediate or instant gratification, which the current generation is often accused of being. All of us in the panel agreed that grit was the most important value for school children and young professionals. However, it's not really valued or underappreciated, or maybe not adequately articulated. And lastly, that we're seeing signs of a lack of grit amongst kids, fresh graduates, and young professionals entering the job market, where they give up easily at the first sign of setback or failure, or they lose interest very quickly. So as a result, we're seeing fragmented career paths and frequent job switches amongst fresh grads and first jobbers. So basically, in a nutshell, the panelists are sharing their concern over this lack of grit amongst the future generation. So that brings me to my first question for you, Datuk. Do you agree that kids in general today are facing a grit deficit?
Thank you, Sheahnee. I think foremost, I would like to thank MILO and congratulate for the study that has been conducted on the grit advantage. I think it throws light on what we know and what others think, educators and both people from the industry think about our students on this grit topic. But I think grit itself has got different levels, I think, depending upon the individual. The threshold level of grit may not be the same from individual to individual. And while we put great importance on grit, and I think that's why we are talking about grit today, but then again, it's not the end all or be all of the personality trait or quality of a person. Having said that, I cannot deny that grit is very important because for obvious good reasons, it contributes towards outcomes that we see. So it's very much related to positive outcomes, especially on the conversation of students. But perhaps the most important to me as an educator, and what we hear from the previous panelists, for instance, Nina, Othman was talking about grit being there even among the very young, but then how do we nurture them? So I think perhaps the most important for me is understanding where individuals are in terms of the grit or how we measure the grit. The improvement, how do we then nurture or improve this trait or quality among the students? So I think how we develop or build the coping ability, the positive emotions, as well as the attitude for survival, I think is most important. So talking about whether there is grit deficit or not, Malaysia participates in the Program for International Student Assessment. And basing on that assessment, or in short PISA, it tries to look at grade, but they don't use the term grade, they use resilience. How resilient are children? So they looked at it on two levels. At the international level, where what's the proportion of children who has the grade, particularly children who are from disadvantaged background, and they use socio-economic background as the indicator to measure disadvantaged children. And with that indicator, how do they then perform on the PISA? Where PISA looks at literacies in mathematics, literacies in science, as well as reading. So how do these disadvantaged children perform, while that in itself indicates the level of resilience of children within those education systems. And they also look at another level within the country itself. So we are looking at the context of each country. What are the factors that contribute towards the level of resilience that we see among these children? So taking on from there, to see whether there's a deficit, is it declining or not? I'm glad to say that across time, when we took PISA in 2012, we saw a proportion of students showing or demonstrating this grade level, where even though they are considered to be from the disadvantaged socio-economic background, but they are showing performance in PISA. And across time, from 2012 to 2018, we see the proportion increasing. So I think that's where we need to understand what has contributed to the level of increase in the proportion of students with great, or as PISA termed it, resilience. So I think among the things that we see important in contributing towards that level of great or resilience as we see it among our children are their self-attitude. What motivates them to master tasks, to learn, to achieve certain positive goals. That's one. The other is in terms of their attitude and their relationship with peers. That's also important. And thirdly is the school environment. The teachers' support, as well as the teachers' enthusiasm and disciplinary climate within the school is also important. So I started with saying that, there are different levels or threshold of grade among children, but how do we then nurture or develop that grade among them? So studies such as this gives not just the proportion that we see among the children, but what kind of factors that also contributes towards that development. So it gives us insights into how we can then help to promote the development of grade among our children. And in our current situation now, where it is, can I say that we are in a crisis, where we see from the MCO, schools are closed, then schools are reopened, and now schools are closed again because we see a spike in the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is such a stressful, I think, situation for our teachers as well as our students, because the ministry says learning must continue to happen. But how does it happen when schools are closed? So teachers need to find new ways or approaches on how they are no longer teaching in the physical classroom, but they now need to teach from their home to students who are at home. Even if we are online and having face-to-face, but it's not physical space. Now it's virtual space that we are talking about. So it needs to be tailored to those kind of situations. And what if children do not have access to online learning? So teachers need to find other ways. So how do we then sustain the motivation to continue to learn despite this stressful or challenging situation? So while we look at certain indicators like how many teachers, how many students are in fact reaching out to our online platform, the Lima, or reaching out to our sources within the dilemma. What kind of modules are they using? How many children are attending home-based learning? So we are very interested to see and that teaching continues, learning continues. This shows a certain level of grit that even within this challenging or stressful situation, we are not ignoring it, but we are trying to embrace and find ways on how best we cope with this situation. So back to the question whether there is a grit deficit, I think we cannot generalize, but we need to learn from the situation and how best we can nurture or develop it because it's already there. How do we then improve and promote it?
As you said, we're currently in a situation or an environment that is ripe for nurturing grit, with kids not being able to attend school and left to their own devices at home and perhaps facing the disadvantages or the inequalities of not having access to the same equipment that other kids might have. So you can see how it might be easier for a student today to give up easily when they're facing that setback, but how can the ability to embrace the failures or the difficulties that they're encountering, especially in an environment like right now, where they can learn from it and turn that into a factor that nurtures success?
Okay, that's a very good question and something we are grappling with too. But then again, as the ministry and how we see continuously improving the education system. So the basing on that, the education system already has the national education philosophy, which says that the education is a continuous effort. And what kind of effort are we doing? This is to develop fully the potential of individuals, as well as to develop them in a holistic and integrated manner. So we are not just talking about the intellectual, but also we are talking about the spiritual, the emotional, as well as the physical aspects, so that the individuals that come out of our education system is balanced and harmonious and be able to contribute for the betterment of themselves, for their family, for the society, as well as for the nation. So having started from this huge and very good philosophy, how do we then translate it into how we can implement it in the education system? So we already have a Malaysia education blueprint from 2013 to 2025. So it sets the vision or the aspiration that we want to achieve for 13 years. So within that blueprint, it has both a system aspiration, what we want to achieve as a system, and we also have the student aspiration. So basing on the national education philosophy, it is then translated into the kind of attributes we want amongst our children that comes out of the education system. And these attributes are the ones we see most important for the 21st century. So there are 6 student attributes: the knowledge, the thinking skills, leadership skills, the language proficiency. We are going for bilingual proficiency, but also encouraging other languages. We are looking at ethics and spirituality, as well as national identity. So it's encompassing. And when we talk about grit or resilience, it's actually there. Although it's not among the 6, but then if we look at it, the aspects within each of the 6, and in particular, leadership skills, if you look at the document, resilience is there. So the document itself states it. But then being a document, we now need to interpret and translate it into what actually happens on the ground in our schools and in our classrooms. So that aspiration is then translated into our curriculum that cuts across, whether it's in the classroom or beyond the classroom, co-curricular activities as well as in sports, because it doesn't sit in just one aspect or in one space of the classroom. So in that sense, I think the education today especially is not solely dependent on just the schools or the teachers to inculcate or nurture these values or traits that we want to see among our students. I think Nina Osman rightly say that, it starts from the young. So for me, I think it starts from the home itself, with the parents. Then, the school would strengthen it. And it also needs to be translated within the community as well, so that there is a strong support structure for the grit to be promoted amongst our students.
Now, coming back to what you said, that learning can happen outside of the classroom, would you say that grit, for example, which is a main component of those attributes you mentioned, can that grit be learned outside the classroom in, say, for example, the football field or the basketball court or the swimming pool, for example?
Absolutely. I agree that the best ways for students to learn and develop the grit can be obtained and learned from, in fact, anywhere. As I said, it's not just the home or the school, but even within the community. And the school is not limited to just the classroom, but also beyond the classroom. I think that's where, when I said that, the philosophy, you want to develop the students in an integrated manner where it encompasses all domains. Likewise, when we translate it into what happens on the ground, it has to be integrated and across the different areas as well, home, school, community, and whether it's in the classroom, it's beyond the classroom. And a lot of things are inculcated, whether in the classroom or in sports itself. For instance, we teach students on how to develop their discipline, respect for others, to work in team. Teamwork is so important in sports. For instance, when it's a group based, it's the same. It's the same sort of things that we want to develop among students in the classroom as well. So that's why it's not bounded by the boundaries of the classroom. It goes from classroom as well as beyond the classroom, and as you mentioned, in sports. So I think the ministry has a specific division for sports, co-curricular activities, as well as the arts. And this is what that we are trying to achieve through this division that we have, so that we have a more inclusive, meaningful, and robust participation in sports, co-curricular, and the arts. And if I can quote one good example that comes to mind is Pandalela Rinong, who we know has contributed and bring glory to Malaysia through her participation in the Olympics. She has won many medals, but at the same time, we also see that she has managed to achieve her degree program as well. So she has managed to juggle between her training as well as her academics, and she has been successful at that. So I think this requires a lot of determination on her part, because I do not think that even through sports that people have been successful purely based on their strength and endurance, because sports requires years of training, a lot of hardship, having to face maybe difficulties and sometimes failures. So to stick to sports and achieve a certain level, just like Pandalela Rinong, requires, I believe, grit. And this is what we want to develop amongst our students. And I truly believe that sports may be one way that we can do it.
That's fantastic. One last question, Datuk, before we let you go. Now, I recently read in the papers when I was researching about you that you didn't set out actually to be a teacher, but you persevered and accepted the scholarship to pursue a career in education anyway. And now, 30 years later, here you are, an important figure in our education system. Dare I say that grit took you to where you are today?
Actually, that's very interesting because I think I said other things as well during the interview for that article. But I think many people referred to my not wanting to be a teacher at that time. Because perhaps I'm now the DG, and it's kind of strange that it wasn't what I started with, having an ambition in the teaching career. But then having committed myself because I accepted the scholarship that was offered by the Ministry of Education. That means I am committed to the ministry as well as what it stands for. First, with that commitment, that's how I started the career. I need to be accountable to deliver on the commitment that I have made to the ministry, first to the education system. So I think along the way, that's the principle that I've held to. And whether there have been struggles in the immediate short term or in the longer term, I believe I have tried to persevere and to try and deliver on that commitment that I have made. And it's not about wanting to fulfill just the immediate short term, but also in the long run. How do we persevere? How do we endure? How do we make good of things so that we can achieve the longer term goal? And in my case, for the education system.
Being responsible for the education of an entire generation of kids can't be easy, I'm sure, and requires a lot of grit for yourself. Nevertheless, we value your contributions, Dr. Habibah. And I really valued what you said when you said that, these attributes that the education system aspires to inculcate in our children, where we're looking to create balanced individuals who can survive in careers that don't exist yet, ties back into what Timothy was saying earlier about how soft skills, other types of skills, even spirituality, leadership, which are skills that can't be taught in any one environment, but that a combination of this on the sports field as well as in the classroom are really probably the things that are going to help this generation to survive in the next generation. Anyway, we understand you have a busy schedule, so we'll let you attend to your other duties now, Datuk. Thank you once again for joining us and for sharing your perspective of grit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and now, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue with our forum, let's take some questions from our audience. I'm sure after hearing from all of our panelists, including Dr. Habibah on her views on our education system, I'm sure many of you have a lot of things on your mind that you want to say or ask our panel. Let's kick off with perhaps our first question. If you're from the media, please don't forget to share what publication you're with so that we know where you're from. And let's ask. Okay, first question is to Shahzad. Shahzad, our audience wants to know if sports can teach grit.
Absolutely, without any doubt. I think sports is a great teacher. I'll give you a few examples if you allow. Our CEO is an avid scuba diver. In Nestle, we have a colleague, Winnie. She is part of the national dragon boat team, Malaysian team.
Wow.
You mentioned about my background earlier. I vividly remember my interview process with the company. I had a 2-page CV. First page was all academics. Second page was all full of extracurricular activities.
Wow.
I was part of the national cricket team, the national university's cricket team. I played grade 2 cricket. I was part of my university hockey team. I was a district badminton champion for doubles. So I've been very much deeply involved in extracurriculars and sports predominantly. So how my interview process went, I obviously didn't realize back then, but now when I reflect on it, I understand what the process was designed to be. So the first interview was a technical interview. They asked me questions about mechanical engineering. What is a pump? What is a compressor? What is a turbine? Formulas, etc. And from that interview onwards, the second and third interview, the assessment center and the final interview were all about behavioral skills, all about qualities, all about trying to probe into my personality and really understand who I am. So I remember a lot of the answers that I gave were coming from the cricket field. Because that's where, as a fresh grad, I didn't have any experience. I had done one internship. I had a lot of sports things to talk about. I was part of dramatics in my university. I was also into music. But cricket was something that I was really passionate about, still am. So I shared a lot of things which I had learned on the cricket field as part of my interview process. Still today, I think some of the learnings which I have are with me. In my office, on my table, I have a cricket ball on my desk. So whenever a tough problem comes to me, I will grab the ball and I will try to see, okay, what do I do? Because that brings me into that thinking mode. So initially, my team started to joke with me and say, "Look, what is this? Is this your stress ball?" And I used to say, "No, this is not a stress ball. This is my thinking ball." As a bowler back then, you were always thinking, where do I ball? Full pitch, short pitch, in swing, out swing. Do I give a run now? Do I contain a run now? So that's the thinking hat that, gets me going when I hold that cricket ball still in my office. Because a lot of tricky situations or problems come to me to resolve. There are a lot of dynamics at play. So that gives me that thinking hat, that gives me that never give up spirit to think that, no, I have to find an answer. How can I crack this? What can I do to solve this problem or support my team or manage the stakeholders that are there? So yeah, I think sports is a great teacher. Like what Dato was also mentioning, a lot of physical stuff, but also a lot of moral and ethical stuff that we want to teach our children is what we learn on a sports field. Either playing a team sport or an individual physical activity or a physical sport, you learn a lot about who you are. And that really builds that character that we spoke about earlier as well.
Yeah, a lot of the soft skills that Timothy was talking about, and also the attributes that Datuk Dr. Habibah was also mentioning, a lot of those you can't put kids in a classroom and say, look, this is soft skills 101. They actually come out in training on the sports field. Maybe for the rest of our panelists, do you perhaps have any experiences of how involvement in a sports or an extracurricular activity when you were younger actually contributed to how you approach your career and your life in general today?
I think, when I look at Shahzad and he talks about his interview process, and as Sheahnee, you mentioned just now, I started my first job in Nestle and the interview was very much similar, to that. And I'm glad some things haven't changed. And my background in sports was also, I used to run for the university. I used to play handball as a captain of the handball team. And a lot of the things that you learn in games, and MILO was always part of that journey since young. I mean, the MILO van coming to school was also one of the reasons why when I got my first job, my parents were very excited about joining Nestle, because to them it was a big thing. And
MILO van.
Yes, MILO van. And so and sports really trains you into teamwork, which then translates into collaboration. And a lot of things that you learn even in uni right now, if I could kind of take that in this pandemic year where a lot of collaboration is being done via online. So the idea of having team meetings or Zoom meetings or Blue Jeans meetings are all being done collaboratively. And all those skill sets are taught very much. If you play team sports, you understand that if you don't have teamwork, you can't get something done. So yes, in a physical world, it's a lot easier. But now as you collaborate while you're studying, I think when the kids go out to the working world, it becomes a seamless a seamless journey. And that's my think on, how sports is preparing kids, is giving them the tenacity, giving them that resilience, that grit that will allow them to collaborate effectively in this new world that, that we're going to be facing for at least the next couple of years.
Fantastic, Tim. Ben and Nina, I mean, Ben, you're always looking at people's resumes, I'm sure, when you're looking at helping them with employment. And Nina, as a parent, also working with other entrepreneurs, do you find that the skills learned from time on the sports field have helped to encourage a different sense of resilience in the people who apply for jobs or for the fellow entrepreneurs that you work with?
Yeah, maybe Nina go first.
It does because I feel that the kids who are exposed to a whole different types of activities, nature, sports, and all this, they have a different outlook in things. Somehow, the ones that sit up in the house playing. Well, I mean, I get different kinds of kids coming for our workshops, right? So then we ask them lah. It's kind of scary. We get kids who at 9 years old never touched wood before. That freaked me out, and I'm like, huh?
What?
Never touched wood, like a stick,
Oh
never
my.
touched before, asking me and stuff, and I'm like, eh? So apparently, the household that he grew up with, I let's not get there lah, but it was really scary for me. And actually I was quite worried. I'm not sure whether I'm gonna answer this question, but I was worried, there was one part where kids were not allowed to play at the school field anymore these days. I'm not sure if some of you are aware of it. I found out recently because apparently one of the schools, a headmaster was telling me this, because one of the parents sent them a letter to sue the school because the child had fallen down and scraped his knee or had something. And then so the whole school had to, I don't know, the teacher was like, okay lah, then cannot lah. So you're not allowed to play at the field unless it's during PJK or PJ time only. During school or after school or during recess cannot play. And I'm like, what? That was a time, was the highlight of going to school, getting to play, I don't know, whatever lah, at the school field and stuff. So I don't know. I feel that this thing is lacking also, this exposure and giving the opportunity for kids to just explore.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Part and parcel of the reason why we have those results for the report from the study from MILO could also be in part where the parents are preventing their children from involving themselves in opportunities to get hurt, to fall down, to get up.
Parents have robbed children the opportunity to struggle. And I think this is the most important thing that we need to build grit. You can't struggle, you don't have challenge, and then you say you don't have meaning and purpose. And you see this in a lot of youth. Oh, I'm looking for meaning and purpose. Why? Because, I had a sheltered life. That's what I get from them.
Yeah.
We work with a...
Yeah. Ben, did you want to add something to that? I mean, you meet a lot of, fresh graduates, people looking for work. Do you see this, the results of that kind of sheltered upbringing coming out in their resumes and in the way they carry themselves in their interviews?
I would like to back to the sports is actually quite important to develop the kids. But take myself as an example. Recently, I joined a road bike. I went for about 20 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. So the sports is about breaking through yourself. It's about mindset, determined to keep going, because if you don't keep going, you cannot go home. And I also train my children in the same room. I basically in the same room, right? My daughter is studying right there. So of course it's not today. So she studied online. We live in a gated and guarded community. So I always encourage her to go out and cycle with her friends, get socialized. And I even leave her alone to socialize with her friends and be independent, taking care of herself, so she can be independent and to make sure she know when to watch out for the cars, and also be safe.
Yeah. Yeah,
try to
they
treat her
need to
from
learn
young.
these life skills, these street skills. I think
Yeah.
that was mentioned earlier on in the forum as well. Those soft skills and those street skills, sometimes some of these things you can't pick up in a classroom. You have to pick it up by
Correct.
going outside of your house and exploring those options out there. Let's go back to Timothy. Now, given the plethora of options that children have in front of them for all sorts of extracurricular activities, all sorts of ways to earn this grit, to nurture this grit, is higher education even necessary? I know that's a tricky question, but
It is, and I think there's a lot of data outside there in terms of what you learn during higher education. And I think higher education is a time where a lot of independence is given to you. Independence to decide on your own, decisions on how if you live, say, on campus, it's about how you manage your time. If you are given an allowance to spend, it's not about how you spend, you kind of finish it up all within the first week, and how do you survive for the next 3 weeks on your
yeah,
friends' generosity, or or do you go on a diet for this next 3 weeks? It's about time management. The decision to go or not to go to class is yours. Coming from a very structured, when you come from a structured K-12 environment where you learn from the age of 7 till 17, your classes are set for you. And so when you join higher education, it's not just about what you study, but I think it's about a mind shift. It's about a mindset change. It's about also the connections that you make, the friends, the alliances that you make during your university or your higher education days. These are, I believe, some of the intangibles that a lot of people don't talk about.
yeah,
You realize
absolutely.
that when you leave university, the people that you know after 5-10 years, a lot of those people can actually assist you, become your mentors, become people that you look up to during higher education. So for me, there is a place and purpose for higher education. I think where higher education has to be is reinventing itself for what it should be, which means it's not just about the grades that you need to get. It's really about, repeating myself, on lifelong learning, so that your jobs or your kind of role that you will play will change. And if you think about it, Shahzad has a degree in mechanical engineering, and now he's in HR.
Yep.
And is one of those things that only after coming to the education industry, I used to go and ask, I always wondered, I said, if you wanted to do engineering, does that mean you are mechanically inclined? And it actually wasn't that. And it really is. Someone studies engineering because they like solving problems.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that until I entered the education industry. I always thought, and on that sense, maybe I should have done engineering in uni rather than doing a degree in economics,
Yep.
because now the kind of job that I do involves solving problems. So it's about solving problems. And I think that's the kind of skill sets that you want to give kids, is really how do you solve problems? Because when you start working, 90% of the time, it's about solving problems. It's someone comes to you and tells you, I've got this issue. How do you solve it? And I think if universities can teach that or inculcate that, then grit really assists you in solving these problems.
There's also more than just what university can teach you, but the kinds of experiences that you can gain from being in university. If I can just share a story of when I was in university, I had to go and study overseas for the first time in my life, living away from my parents and arriving at the student village and suddenly being away from everything that I have ever known. Things are not being given to me on a silver platter. I now have to find my own money, my own food, my own furniture. And I thought back to myself, I can't get on a plane and fly back now. And what's funny is that all of those years of competitive swimming, for example, came back to me, where when you've jumped off the block and you're in the pool and you're swimming, you can't stop. You can't stop, because if you stay in the middle of the pool, you can't get out. It's exactly that kind of thinking that it took me back to, that I realized I'm just going to have to swim until I get to the finish line. And I survived. And I think that's something that being away from your parents when you study in university, that's something that nothing else can give you, really.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, Nina, I'd just like to throw this question to you. We've gotten this question from one of our audience. Do parents really know best when they are shielding children from failure? Because we think we're doing this out of love. We're trying to protect them, keep them safe. But as you said, we're giving them a sheltered life.
Yeah, so they don't. The answer is parents. And we only find out later when these kids, start work and things like that, jumping from here to there. And when I do talk to these kids, or rather graduates and stuff like that, it's because they feel that they want to try more. Like they didn't have a chance to do so many things when they were younger, and they had a schedule, and right now it's like freedom time, and they want to try everything. So probably, I don't know, I don't do studies. I'm guessing probably that's why they jump, because they just haven't found
They're
something that they like,
exploring.
and they were not given
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Correct. So the opportunity to explore and things like that, some did not get that chance. So now that they're away from their parents' eyes, they try it out now, either in at work and things like that. So I see this in both urban and rural setting. They think they are helping, but really it's dangerous for me to say this, but I want to say it anyway. It's actually damaging.
Yeah.
It's really quite damaging for the child.
What can we do? I mean, look, all of us tuning in today, we only want the best for our children. If we're sheltering them, it's because we love them. Nobody wants to take away opportunity from our kids, but what should we do and what can we do then?
Like I said, don't rob them from the opportunity to struggle. That's I feel that is the missing link. Just if they wanted something, get them to actually work for it. But then don't until just say they want a video game or whatever it costs, like $800 or something. At least meet them halfway. At least get them to work for that first 200, and then you top up 600. Never mind but at least they feel there's value to what they did, and they really appreciate it more. And that's, I think, why a lot of parents are doing this instant gratification thing. They feel guilty. They're not around. They go off work and then they come back, and then iPhone 7 comes out. The next thing you know, the child has an iPhone on their bed.
Boy.
And the child even asked for it.
Yeah.
All they wanted was some time to just have a conversation, chit chat and stuff like that. So this guilt that parents have, and then giving in to instant gratification, it doesn't allow the child to grow, I guess. Yeah.
And Ben, I'm sure you've had cases where you see parents who love their children so much, they actually show up for the interview together with their child. Is this something that you've seen in your experience at Talentbank?
Yeah, we do have candidates, they have parents waiting for them downstairs, or maybe some of them, they actually walk up to the office and sit at the sofa. So even some employers also told us the same.
Yeah. And as someone who assists them to get work, how does that change your view perhaps of the candidate if they bring their parents along with them?
I think, to me, I think they lack of independence on them, and they actually, I think most of the employers will immediately fail them. They'll fail immediately. And so in my opinion, I think they should not do that, but instead maybe the children, they should research about the company, do it everything by themselves, and just find out all the way to the office. Take a bus without having the parents to send them to the office.
Yeah. I mean, as it is, I'm a parent of 3 children myself. It's not too late for me. I've been guilty of sheltering my own kids because I love them so much, to the point that I've been depriving them of taking part in sports, for example. But I think after today's forum, I think probably the best thing I can do is involve them perhaps in entrepreneurship, involve them in a sport that they choose, where they can actually have some independence and some input into that. And if they do really badly at it, well, they're just going to have to deal with the consequences of their choice and get up and move on, right? Does anyone have anything to add to that in terms of suggestions on what I can do?
I think, Nina, the question is, I think, unfortunately, in this age of social media, is that there's all these horrible stories that were never available to us growing up. And so I think social media, unfortunately, is a purveyor of, forwarded messages on WhatsApp on, so-and-so's kid was kidnapped. And so our helicoptering as parents, I think that's where the amount of rope that we allow the kid to go far away from us without your eyes seeing it is always going to be tough. Growing up, I used to go to the field in front of my house. You would go out, head to the field at about 5 o'clock, and then by 7:20, when you hear the azan sounding, you knew it was time to come back.
Yeah.
And that's when you would come back, and you would be sorted. Your parents didn't. Your whole neighborhood knew who you were. Uncles and aunties from around the neighborhood would look out for you. If you had any falls or scrapes, you would come back, put some iodine onto it, and move on.
Just deal with it. Yeah.
Deal with it, and that's how it is. Now it's a full-blown trip to SJMC to check whether you've got rabies, and you get a tetanus jab for that. So it's a different life that we live in. So I suppose we've got to learn to deal with it in that sense.
I think the trick here really is for parents themselves to also find that balance between loving our children and understanding at which point we're supposed to let them go on their own and figure out what it is that their interests are. Perhaps, Shahzad, if you'd like to add to that. I mean, the cricket, was that your parents' choice or was it your own choice? And, balancing that with all of the other things that you did in your life, how did that come into play?
So cricket was my choice. Mechanical engineering was my parents' choice. Yeah. I was always good in sports. Even in school, I was pretty active in a lot of things. And I think sports, given the opportunity, I would, not waste my time just watching TV. I would pick up something and would just, do something. Even if I'm home, not much to do during an MCO, I will just go out in the corridor and swing my golf club. So that's, I guess, who I am. Sports is really, sports gives me my me time. And, with the tough routine, with the hectic routine of, everything on the go, you're always connected, always things happening at workplace. You have to find your own time to switch off. Even, if you have to think of work, to me, with a golf club in hand, I can think better than, maybe a paper and a pen. So I guess that's how I've grown to be. And just I need to
I think that's another
persevere
thing
with who I
that
am.
a lot of us parents are missing nowadays. Of course, this generation is also dealing with one of the highest rates of depression of all time. And I wonder sometimes whether perhaps it's our choices as parents to deprive them of that me time, that time that they have to invest their emotions into sport, as an outlet for themselves, whether by taking that away from them in the name of love, giving them that opportunity to go and run outside in the park, whether depriving them of that is actually doing them more of a disservice as they grow up. Do any of you have any experience in relation to that? Do you see that in your line of work, Timothy? I mean, you're dealing with young people who I'm sure are dealing with so many pressures in this day and age.
Correct. And I think which is why what is good is that getting access and social, the social stigma of asking for help from trained counselors has gotten very little now. It's actually lessened quite considerably. All our campuses have got trained counselors, and we do see access to those trained counselors increasing, and people are more comfortable talking about it, as compared to when you were growing up, when you were in secondary school. going to the guru counseling room was almost like a no-no. You know, if someone actually went into that room, it was like, okay, you became the talk of the school, that you had some problems. But I think there's more acceptance that it's okay to talk about it, which is good. And rightfully so, like I said, during this MCO period, I think there are a lot more effort that is being done by universities and colleges to reach out to the students, because I think living in isolation is actually quite serious, because you are as a university student, this should be the peak time of your enjoyment, of going out, of mixing with friends, of being social is really, this is the time for you. So being confined changes the dynamics. And so making sure that the mental well-being of a child is actually supremely important at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think also when I was younger as well, when we were upset about something, or we had a lot of emotions about something, we would just go out and play or take out that emotion in sports. And nowadays, because there are far less children involved in these kinds of activities, there's less places for those emotions to go as well. So I think that's given a lot for us to think about what we can do as parents in the name of love, in the name of protecting them. That actually sometimes giving them that freedom to choose their sports, to choose their activities, outlets for them to explore their passion, their perseverance, their resilience, letting them fall down and get up and embrace that failure. All of these things are things that we're going to have to, think about after this forum is over. But we're unfortunately going to have to wrap up this forum because we've run out of time. I'm just going to share a few key takeaways from our discussion so far. First of all, the importance of identifying early signs of a lack of grit among children and young people. No signs are too small to ignore. I think, like Nina was saying, you see that grit is evident at a young age. But if a child is not showing these early signs, all right, then it's important for parents to act quickly so that these attitudes and behaviors don't carry on into adulthood and then negatively impact the way that children perceive and pursue success in future. And as Tim was saying also, that you can already see the signs of a lack of grit in university, but even then it's not too late to still address that while they're in university. Secondly, as we heard, of course, from all of you, that well-rounded talents are preferred over those with just good grades. I'm sure if Shahzad went for his interview and didn't have all of that about his cricket and his behavioral analysis and all that, it might have been a different story for you, Shahzad. But with 85% of jobs that will be essential by 2030 not existing yet, it's all the more reason for students and future job seekers today to develop that grit that they'll need to thrive and succeed, so that whatever jobs do appear in future, they're prepared for all of it. And finally, the ability to learn and bounce back from mistakes. I think that's a critical component of grit. It's an important early predictor of success. And I think if we involve our kids in sports, we'll be able to give them that opportunity to learn that on their own. However, as Ben mentioned, it's severely lacking among young professionals today. So strong character traits are crucial for driving professional success in the future. And finally, the most important key takeaway from the whole forum today is that sports, yes, you can do well in academics, okay? But sports is a great way to teach grit. Qualities that can be nurtured by taking part in sports, such as drive, determination, hard work, discipline, they're the building blocks of grit. And they're very well embodied in the never give up spirit or attitude and the mindset of champions. And the achievement gained through sports is never immediate. As Datuk Dr. Habibah said, it comes from years of training, like Pendalela Rinong, for example, perseverance and effort. And so having that sports complementing the academics best, like Pendalela Rinong's case, it's a must-have for parents if they want to support their child's early development. So the grit that you learn from sports is something that you keep for life. So with that, we've come to the end of the MILO Grit Advantage Forum. I hope that for our audience tuning in, this has been an illuminating discussion for you, because it certainly has for me. On behalf of MILO Malaysia, I'd like to once again thank all of our panelists, Shahzad, Timothy, Nina, Ben, for your wonderful insights. I'm really going to have a lot to think about at the end of this forum. To our friends in the media who are joining us, all our other guests, thank you for joining in the conversation. Before I sign off, I just have a few more housekeeping announcements to share. Let's just bring up that slide, because we have some special announcements for you. Let's take a look. A special gift has been arranged for all of our guests tuning in today. This gift will be delivered to you at home in 2 weeks' time after the event, so you're going to want to look out for that. Also, we'd love to know what you think about the event today. So you're going to get a post-event evaluation form via a link. So please do fill that up and share with us what you thought, so we can improve in future. And finally, everything from today will be recorded. So if you want to go back and take a look at everything we've discussed today, ponder on it a little bit more, please have a look at that, and we hope that you'll benefit from it. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, to our panelists, to our audience, this has been Sheahnee Iman for the MILO Grit Advantage Forum. Till we meet again, salam aktif negaraku. Thank you, and assalamualaikum. Have a great day.